invite you to rise and sing with me a hymn asking our Holy Spirit to come. Come, Holy Ghost, Creator blessed, and in thy hearts take up thy rest. Come with thy grace and heavenly aid to fill the hearts which thou hast made, to fill the hearts which thou hast made. Amen. Please be seated. You are indeed most welcome to this presentation. My name is Helene Paharic. On behalf of Bishop Zubik, I welcome you all to today's presentation, Keep Calm and Make Disciples. The title of today's presentation comes from that slogan during the Second World War, where our brothers and sisters across the pond, our sisters and brothers in Great Britain, had some mottos to help them stay focused during the turmoil and the uncertainty during the war. Not unlike our sisters and brothers of the early church, whose time we recall in these days between the ascension of our Lord and the descent of the Spirit at Pentecost, who were huddled in an upper room in prayer, a time of uncertainty, a time of confusion, a time when we were pleading for the outpouring of the Spirit so that we might gain guidance and wisdom, knowledge, understanding, right judgment, and a sense of wonder and awe. We too are in times that might feel uncertain, times of change, times when we too are pleading for the coming of the Spirit. Our presentation today is on the Catholic Leadership Institute's Disciple Maker Index. And if you'll allow me, I would like to give just a brief presentation by way of introducing our presenter, Mr. Dan Salucci. In our parishes, we need to remain calm and make disciples. All of us are engaged in the activities of worship, word, and witness. We know that the Eucharist is the source and summit of our life as Christians. We know that we immerse ourselves in God's word and seek to share it through our many catechetical and formative opportunities. We know that we witness to God's mercy by our acts of charity, justice, and peace. But in all these activities, we need to be about making disciples. Matthew's gospel has Jesus give us 4 verbs, and we love those too. Come and see. How tender, how delightful it is to come and see and be with Jesus, to walk along the shores of Galilee with him, to ride in the boat, to read his word, to experience him in the sacraments and in our neighbors in whom we recognize him. How wonderful it is to come and see. But often we forget what Jesus just shared with us this past weekend and on Ascension Thursday, that we are not just to come and see, but we come and see in order to go and make. Go and make. And what are we going and making? Disciples. Today's presentation is on how it is we are to go and make disciples. Not only are we to go and make disciples, but we are to transform disciples into disciple makers. Those that are involved in word, worship, and witness are to be about inviting others to come and share our joy. We're going to learn today about how it is we can go and make disciples, and in so doing, ourselves become disciple makers and form others to be disciple makers. Not just disciples, but disciple makers, because that is indeed what we are. The work of evangelization is both an art and a science. It is both an art. Like all things of beauty, there is design and dimension, order, as well as creativity. The art for us as the Diocese of Pittsburgh is beautifully articulated in Bishop Zubik's pastoral letter, The Church Evangelizing. There will be a training, you received a flyer as you came in, to help all of us learn more about this document, to help us pray, read, study, reflect, and share the church evangelizing. This pastoral letter, the 4th of Bishop Zubik's, is really the lens through which we will become the church alive. It is by realizing the call to be the church evangelizing that in all 6 counties we will become the church alive. I'd like to share with you, before I get to the science, a little bit more about the art. The diocese has established a website, thechurchevangelizing.com. On the website are resources for us to engage in the text. There's an audio file, there's a downloadable PDF of the document. There's also an app for Apple devices, for your iPad, and soon for your iPhone, to help you read, reflect, engage, and study, not just on the text itself, but on Bishop Zubik's sources. What was he reading when he wrote that paragraph? What does he recommend for our conversation? Additionally, in the coming weeks and months, we'll be posting online forums where we can share ideas. What insights do you bring to this text? What are you inspired to do? There are 12 words that really form the thesis of Bishop's pastoral letter and really provide for us the art of evangelization. Those 12 words are simply, be a friend. Be a friend of Jesus. Make friends for Jesus.
The church evangelizing. What is it? Where is it? Who is it? How is it? When is it? The answer to these questions is as close as one of the most treasured realities of life: friendship. One of the greatest needs that we have in our lives are our friends. And isn't it so beautiful that Jesus, in his Last Supper conversation with the apostles who are gathered there around, he speaks of them as friends. It's not just a bishop, priest, deacon thing. It's not just a sister-brother thing. It's the role of absolutely everybody who's been baptized to do precisely that. We should never forget that beautiful scene at the end of Matthew and Mark's Gospel, where Jesus is standing there looking at folks who look just like you and me. And he said, my part in all of this is coming to a close. Now I need you to go and tell the good news of what I've just done for you. I need you to go out and to demonstrate my love through your eyes, through your hands, and by way of your heart. Our Lord is depending on our witness, our vocation, our evangelization, as if you and I were the only Christians on the earth. In the spirit of Jesus, I invite you to join with me in being evangelizers, strong in prayer, heartfelt in words, sealed with deeds, and sustained for the long haul, not with the language of the lips, but with the language of the heart. That, my friends, is the new evangelization. That is the church evangelizing. Together, may we grow so strong in faith, hope, and love that others can stand on our shoulders as we have stood on the shoulders of those before us. And as we do so, let us together, now and for ages to come, be the church evangelizing.
The art of the church evangelizing, Bishop articulates quite beautifully, quite artistically himself in the pastoral letter. He invites us to be a friend of Jesus, and to make friends for Jesus by engaging in prayer, in partnerships for one another, with and for one another. And he identifies 8 building blocks or behaviors that help us to develop the art of friendship, to help each of us as individuals and as parish communities to grow in our capacity to encounter the other, to invite them into a relationship, and ultimately to invite them into a relationship, into a friendship with Jesus Christ. Our work is also engaging in the science of evangelization. One of the things that the diocese is engaged in with our website will be some social media. We know that our vision, our strategy is to make disciples into disciple makers. So one of the activities that we are scientifically proposing to do is to post online media advertisements in those places where Catholics hang out on the internet. And those social media ads will encourage, drive, direct, entice, welcome Catholics to visit the Church Evangelizing website, to watch the video you just saw, to download the document, to read it, to download the app, to participate in a discussion forum. Our focus for the next 12 months is to refine our work as artisans in crafting the Church Evangelizing through the beautiful task of friendship, the beautiful joy of friendship. I'd like to share with you a few of those social media ads. So you may be on your favorite website, and we'll be able to look at these ads they're probably released in the month of July.
For nearly 170 years, the Church of Pittsburgh has fed the hungry, cared for the poor, educated our children, welcomed the stranger, and proclaimed the gospel. The Church of Pittsburgh has always been the church evangelizing. We Catholics are here today because of those who have gone before us. Now it is our turn. I ask you to reimagine the Catholic life we share as members of the body of Christ in the Church of Pittsburgh.
That's our 30-second ad, and the thought again is to be online where disciples are, show this 30-second online advertisement that would invite them, hopefully encourage them to go to the website, the Church Evangelizing. Our technological partner in this will help us to track where we're getting action, what sites are effective, what people do when they visit the Church Evangelizing website. How long do they stay? What do they look at? Do they download the app? So we're doing some analytical research to find out what tools are effective in engaging people in the website, and then once on the website, what are people finding most useful as they seek to be a friend of Jesus, and make friends for Jesus. By far, the most important science that we are engaging in as we seek to realize Bishop's vision for us to be the Church Evangelizing is indeed the Disciple Maker Index Survey that Mr. Dan Salucci, the Vice President of Catholic Leadership Institute for Episcopal and Diocesan Service, will present to us today. So please join me in welcoming Dan Salucci.
Great. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. How are you? Yeah, good. Well, it is almost summer. It is kind of humid outside, and I'm about to talk to you a lot about data. So I think before we do that, we need some strong support from the Holy Spirit. I think the song was a great start, but I thought we might engage in some prayer if that's okay with you. All right? Okay. So as Helene mentioned, I really enjoy this season of our liturgical calendar because I think the readings, they always seem to speak to me more than any other season. And I've just been really moved by some of the latest readings. And so I actually have one passage. It wasn't this last weekend's, it was the weekend before, but it stuck out to me and I want to share it with you. I also have an excerpt from our Holy Father's Apostolic Exhortation. So I'm going to share these two with you. And then what I'm going to ask you to do is reflect on them, and with a partner, somebody next to you, maybe the word or phrase that stuck out to you as you read this today. Okay? So I'm going to share these with you. I'll read them. They'll be up on the screen. And then maybe the word or phrase that stuck out to you, just share it with the person next to you or near you. Okay? So this is from, again, 2 weekends ago, the letter from Peter. Now, who is going to harm you if you are enthusiastic for what is good? But even if you should suffer because of righteousness, blessed are you. Do not be afraid or terrified with fear of them, but sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts. Always be ready to give an explanation to anyone who asks you for a reason for your hope. And our second excerpt. One of the more serious temptations which stifles boldness and zeal is a defeatism, which turns us into querulous and disillusioned pessimists, sourpusses. Nobody can go off to battle unless he is fully convinced of victory beforehand. If we start without confidence, we have already lost half the battle, and we bury our talents. The evil spirit of defeatism is brother to the temptation to separate before it's time the wheat from the weeds. It is the fruit of an anxious and self-centered lack of trust. So maybe let's just reflect on that for 30 seconds. And then when you're ready, just turn to the person next to you and a word or phrase that maybe struck you from either of these passages.
Burying of talents. And one of the things with our church, the Protestants and evangelicals are much more our church.
Thank you for sharing with somebody near you and sharing how the Lord might be speaking to you this day. As you can see from this first excerpt from Peter, the part that stuck out to me was that part in bold, obviously, the bold and italicized. Always be ready to give an explanation to anyone who asks you for a reason for your hope. And so I think what struck me about this particular part of this letter from Peter is it assumes we have hope. And not only does it assume we have hope, it assumes that our hope is so evident, so obvious, that people can't help but ask us about it. And so I think that that's just a fundamental part of our call of discipleship, is to display that hope, to be those beacons of hope. And so I'm constantly reminded of that in this season of Pentecost coming up and Easter, that we always be those beacons of hope. Relative to Pope Francis, I mean, man, does he come out with something every day that could keep me focused for a year. But I find this interesting, this center paragraph here. Nobody can go off to battle unless he is fully convinced of victory beforehand. Different language than I think we've ever heard from this Pope, and very important. This idea of hope and confidence in the mission, not that's ours, but is that of Jesus Christ. And we're a part of it. So again, just two bits of reflection for us to get started this afternoon, but to put us on the right track. Let me share my hopes for today. I think Helene might have oversold me a bit. I don't know that I can tell you how to go and make disciples. If you have that answer, I would like to know. But what I do want to do is share with you a little bit about the Catholic Leadership Institute, for those of you who don't know about our apostolate, but more importantly, our national study of Catholic parishes, which is called the Disciple Maker Index. In doing that, I want to highlight 3 perspectives on parish vibrancy. And by that way, offering you a context on maybe what you can reflect on in your own ministry, maybe some strengths that you might have or some opportunities you might want to take a look at. I'd also love to leave enough time to respond to and learn from your questions and comments on what I'm going to share. Just a little bit about the Catholic Leadership Institute. For those of you who don't know, I do have the privilege of serving as the vice president for the apostolate. We are an apostolate that is based in Philadelphia on that other side of the state, but we do work with over 150 bishops in the United States and Canada, more than 2,000 priests, more than 8,000 parish, diocesan staff, as well as key volunteers, at this point in close to 100 dioceses, again, in the United States and Canada. We've been very blessed with the support of Bishop Zubik to work here in the Diocese of Pittsburgh for many years. And so Bishop Zubik is a graduate of our programs, as well as 90-plus priests here in the diocese and 60 parish and diocesan staff, some of whom are still actively in some of our programs that we offer. How do we serve the church? 3 primary ways. As an apostolate, we seek to offer tools. Those might be models, frameworks, best practices, online resources, a survey tool like the Disciple Maker Index that we'll talk about today. We offer training and formation programs. So those 90 priests in your diocese have been through a program called Good Leaders, Good Shepherds. It's a 2-year executive leadership program for priests. But we also do training at the chancery level. We do ongoing formation sessions for bishops. And we do training for seminarians as well in leadership and governance. And finally, we are blessed to provide some consulting services to dioceses. We do diocesan priority planning, custom training or facilitation for any number of needs in a local church, as well as development with a bishop or a pastor and his senior team. Why we do it, most importantly, our hope is to strengthen confidence and competence in ministry, to enable leaders to articulate a vision for their local church, to call forth the gifts of those they lead, and really all in service to creating more vibrant faith communities in Jesus Christ. That ultimately is the reason we do everything that we do, and I'm sure that you do everything that you do in your roles in the parishes. So that's why we as an apostolate serve. This is why I serve. So I'm going to lighten the mood with some pictures of kids. You can't get away from that in the afternoon. These are my 3 beautiful angels. You have Katie there with the red hair. We have Peter on the side there. And we have Annie in the middle. And Annie is 6 years old and very smart. She has been initiating her sister into the faith repeatedly over this Easter season. She watched it happen on Easter Vigil. But I show you this picture both to share my kids, but also to share with you the moment when I became a friend of Jesus. And so that's Annie at age 60 minutes. And about 4 hours after that, both Annie and my wife were in the ICU. So I was 24 years old, first child, and I'm running between hospital floors hours after my first child was born. Not much what I expected. At this point, I had been working for the church for several years, grown up in the church, grown up in a Catholic family. But what would happen is, after this moment, for about 6 or 8 weeks after that, my wife would remain in the hospital, and at some point I would have to take Annie home by myself. So it was touch and go for several weeks, and it wasn't really sure what Tricia's position or condition would be, and what role she'd be able to play in raising Annie, if any. And so one night I was holding Annie, feeding her, doing that midnight feeding, and my mom was in the house somewhere. She was helping out. But I found myself faced with this moment where I had had a plan all my life. I'd gone to the college I wanted. I had studied what I wanted. I got the job that I wanted. I did all the right things in all the right places. And yet I'm in this place that was nothing like I thought I would be. And I just kept saying, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And then I started saying, Jesus, I don't know what to do. And that was the first time in my prayer life that I used the name of the Lord, that I spoke to him instead of kind of thinking of him as this being that certainly was important, but not really in my life. And my mom came up and she said, who are you talking to? Who are you talking to? And so I share that with you because I find it fascinating that after 12 years of Catholic school and working for the church for 6 years, I didn't really know Jesus. And so I think we have to be careful for ourselves, but also as we seek to serve and minister to those in our pews as to where people are in that relationship. It is a friendship. It is a relationship. It has moments and seasons and growth. And so we can't ever kind of take that for granted or think that because somebody's sitting in front of us or somebody's wearing a collar or somebody's been on parish council for 6 years that they're at a certain place. Because I wasn't. And I guarantee you some of the people in your parishes are not. So again, what I want to do is lay a framework, is lay a context for you to understand parish life. And it's particularly interesting and fun for me to be with you because our study is in its first year, but our first year, one of our dioceses that we looked at was the Diocese of Pittsburgh. So this data is especially relevant to you. But let's look at the challenge that we have, and we all know this, but again, just to put it in front of us, we have a very small percentage of United States Catholics who are actively engaged in the practice of their faith. Okay, that's not surprising. For anybody who's read Matthew Kelly's 4 Signs of a Dynamic Catholic, right? We've heard of this research before, but it's, again, important to share. 7% of registered parishioners contribute 80% of the volunteer hours. So 7%. 7% of parishioners contribute 80% of our financial contributions that make all of our ministry possible. And there's an 84% overlap between these two groups. Okay? So I love Matthew Kelly when he says, just think if it was 8%. Nobody will feed more people, clothe more people, care for more people in the world today than the Roman Catholic Church. And in this country, it's 7%. Think if it was 8%. In another study that Nancy Ammerman, Pillars of Faith, she asked and looked at different congregations. And she asked the question, for the congregation, for what percent of parishes is spreading the faith a high priority? So in Protestant congregations, they said 75%. Okay? African American congregations, 57%. And in Catholic congregations, when asked how big of a priority it was to spread the faith, it was 6%. Okay? So obviously some low-hanging fruit, as they say, right? Some opportunity here. A little bit about our Disciple Maker Index. As an apostolate, we're a nonprofit. We are investing $1.2 million over the next 3 years to create a tool for parishes. Again, one of those ways that we serve. But first and foremost, we want a tool that allows individual parishioners to reflect on their own discipleship and their relationship with Jesus. How many times do we even just give people the space to take a moment and think about where they are in that relationship? We also want to offer a tool for parishes to be able to assess what they're doing effectively that supports that growth in discipleship, but also maybe surface opportunities to strengthen or improve some things. We think it'll provide valuable input to help pastors and parish leaders make better decisions. We all have limited time, limited resources. Where can we put our energy and effort that's really going to help people in our communities? Our goal is to have at least 100 parishes in this study in the next 3 years. I think we'll blow that away, just given the demand that we've experienced in this first year. But we hope to offer it as an ongoing tool for parishes. It is a survey tool. It is a tool that a parish could put at use in their parish. It has 26 perception questions. They speak to spiritual growth, relationships, personal beliefs. We ask about core beliefs of the faith, as well as activities and ministries. We also asked a series of demographic questions so that we could understand who's actually responding to the survey. And you have the handouts with you. I thought I don't usually give out handouts before, but I thought with this amount of data, it might be helpful to have something that you could track along with. So you have that in front of you. To let you know who responded, we did 3 dioceses to start, the Diocese of Pittsburgh. We also did the Diocese of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the Archdiocese of Galveston, Houston. We were looking, and we will continue to look for a cross-section of dioceses and parishes within those dioceses to be able to give us different benchmarks. We were thrilled with the response rate of those requested to fill out a survey. We canvassed parishes, we sent out emails, we offered it online. We had a 41% response rate, almost close to 9,000 responses. To give you just a sense of comparison, Matthew Kelly's research is based around 3,000 responses. So we have about triple that number, so very thrilled with that. To give you a sense of who in Pittsburgh participated, we have 11 parishes that participated. Okay, you can see the list there. I won't go through them. But over 3,000 people in the Diocese of Pittsburgh responded to this. So not a small percentage when you think about the overall respondent size. Important point to keep in mind as I go through the rest of these slides. Of the people we surveyed, close to 90% reported that they go to Mass at least weekly. At least weekly. So these are people who are in the pews. And we knew that it would skew that way. based on how the survey is distributed, but it's just important to keep that in mind as I go through some of the other demographics. This is a framework that we put together at Catholic Leadership Institute, working with people like Sherry Waddell and Matthew Kelly, and actually Bishop Zubik and Helene and folks around the country to kind of try to get our hands around what's happening in parishes. Okay? So when we look at the continuum of discipleship, because a baptized Catholic is by nature of that baptism a disciple, but as a good Archbishop told me, everybody's a practicing Catholic, some are just practicing a little harder than others. And so I like that line. I think it gives everybody room there. But when we look at that, we really kind of looked at all the research that was out there and came up with kind of 4 primary groupings. Again, just to understand where people might be on their journey. We have baptized Catholics who are no longer practicing, kind of Catholic in name only, and you could say they've fallen away, they've been bored away, they've been driven away, what have you. Okay? But we have these folks that are out there. We also have baptized Catholics who are coming but would tell you that they are practicing a faith of habit. Okay? They are coming to Mass maybe 6 or 7 times a year, or maybe weekly, but it's kind of a rote functional thing for them. We're using Sherry Waddell's intentional disciple language. This would be the 5 to 7% that are really doing all that heavy lifting relative to ministry and giving, coming every week and engaged in that. And then we have disciple makers. These are people who would say they are equipped and going out and individually discipling other people. So individually bringing people along in a relationship with the Lord. When we look at how the numbers kind of break down for this, again, this is across a couple different sources of information. All the reports would tell you we have about 50 to 60% or 36 million Catholics who are non-practicing. About 23% who are coming to Mass occasionally during the year. 10% who are coming weekly, okay? That 5 to 7% or 3 to 4 million in the country who are intentional disciples. The number of people who would say that they have been formed to form others and are discipling people individually is 0.04% of Catholics in the United States. So that's roughly 1.5 for every parish in the United States, about 25,000 people. Okay? And when we look at how our survey respondents kind of broke down, you see that last line there, you can see we did have some of those non-practicing Catholics who took the survey, 4% of those 9,000, 27% in that kind of practicing a faith of habit, the majority in that intentional disciple category, and we don't really know how many people are out there discipling. We did ask those questions, but it's kind of harder to get a sense around that. But again, I just want to orient you to who was responding in this survey, so it kind of gives you a framework for the other information that I might share. Another great one from the Apostolic Exhortation. The parish is not an outdated institution, precisely because it possesses great flexibility. It can assume quite different contours depending on the openness and missionary creativity of the pastor and the community. And the Holy Father goes on to say, in all of its activities, the parish encourages and trains its member to be evangelizers. So we know that most people experience their faith at the parish level, right? And so we all want vibrant parishes. Catholic Leadership Institute has it in its purpose statement. We want to create vibrant faith communities. One of the challenges is we don't really have a good working definition as to what is vibrant. We have some ideas. We can kind of have our own idea, right? So what I'd like to do is share with you 3 potential ways you could think about parish vibrancy. But I'm sharing these as a way to also help share with you the information we learned in this first gathering of data from the Disciple Maker Index. So the first way we could look at parish vibrancy is whether somebody would recommend the parish or not, right? The likelihood to recommend. I don't know, anybody go to Home Depot recently? Show of hands, or Walmart or anything? Okay. You might have seen on the bottom of your receipt, there's a survey that you can go online. I go on every time to take that Home Depot survey, and I have yet to win that $5,000 gift card. But I am going to keep trying, mind you. But anyway, they always ask you the question, how likely would you be to recommend Home Depot to a friend, right? It seems like a simple question. That question has actually been studied profusely in market research. And it is actually right now kind of the cutting edge market research question for whether an organization will grow or decline. Is someone's likelihood, or the number of people's likelihood, to recommend that organization. So we put that question in here, as well as other questions. Would you recommend your parish? Now, we asked the question on an agree scale. So strongly agree, neutral, slightly disagree, and strongly disagree. The way that market research works right now is not that you take the agree and strongly agree, but rather that you take the strongly agree and you subtract from it the detractors, meaning those who are neutral or disagree. Okay? Because what you can see there is, do you have kind of a positive ratio or a negative ratio? Do you have more people promoting in that strongly agree, or do you have more people detracting? Now, you're probably sitting there and say, well, I always just say agree. I never give anybody a 5 out of 5. Well, the reality is, though, and that's fine and that's positive, but the people who are actually out there promoting the organization are the people who respond in the strongly agree. The other people are people who will be asked the question and say, yeah, it's good. You should come to our parish, sure. The people who say strongly agree are the ones out there kind of promoting. So that's why we use the strongly agree in relationship to those disagree and neutral folks. Okay? So let's look at how our parishes did in the study. You will see there, I'm going to let this slide kind of sit in for a moment because it's bar graphs, and if you're like me, I did not do well in math as school, so I always take a moment to have to take a look at these charts. In the middle there is a red bar graph that says 57%. That's the average across the 21 parishes that we looked at. You're going to see some gold bar graphs off to the side. At the bottom there, that's the average for the different dioceses that participated. So congratulations, Pittsburgh had the highest, 62%. And then you're going to see the top performing parishes in the study, with the first one being named, and that is St. John and Paul Parish here in the Diocese of Pittsburgh. So again, congratulations. And then you're going to see the lowest three in the data set, the lowest three parishes. We do this not to make it a competition, but we do this to provide some context. It's one thing to know your cholesterol, but if you don't know it relative to your age group or what's normal or what's not normal, it's not helpful information. So our hope with this study is to be able to show parishes different benchmarks against different types of parishes in rural settings or urban settings, large dioceses, small dioceses, all different types of things down the road. But here again, St. John and Paul had the highest likelihood to recommend. Okay? So you have a challenge. I didn't give you all the information. The next slide there, the top 5 reasons to recommend a parish. One of the things that's really neat for us to be able to do is to look at this data in the aggregate and see what other trends are coming to the surface. So my question to you, and if you have a pen, jot it down. If not, kind of keep note in your head. What would you think are the top 5 things that people said about their parish when they also said that they were likely to recommend it? So for the people who were likely to recommend their parish, think of what you think are the top 5 reasons they were likely to recommend their parish. Jot those down for yourself or make a mental note in the next couple seconds. All right, anybody want to venture a guess at number 1? Hospitality, not number 1, but on the list. Preaching, not number 1, but it is on the list. Pastor, the number 1 likely, if they were likely to recommend the parish, they were also most strongly likely to recommend their pastor. Okay, so for the priests in the room, sorry, you don't get out of any important job anytime soon. Your role is significant relative to people's experience. The number 2 was if the parish offered vibrant and engaging liturgy. So if they were likely to recommend their parish, they were also likely to say that the parish has vibrant and engaging liturgy. Preaching that connects to my everyday life. If the parish offers that on a consistent basis, they were likely to recommend their parish. Interestingly, this one rose to the surface, and we honestly are not sure that why, but if people felt as if they have been formed as a disciple, they resonated with this language across the 3 dioceses, then they were likely to recommend their parish. And last makes me feel welcome and accepted. So those are in order of kind of strength of correlation, if you will, how strongly they correlated. But those are the top 5 reasons that folks would recommend their parish. So we'll take a look. The next set of graphs are going to be how the different parishes did against those different 5 barometers. So there was almost a 1-to-1 correlation between the pastor and the parish. Likelihood to recommend. Okay? And again, St. John and Paul, they're at the top. Pittsburgh, you all like your pastors. That's a good thing. Okay? My parish helps me grow spiritually. A little bit lower there. Offering vibrant and engaging Mass. Here we get to about a third who would strongly agree, a third who are neutral, and a third who would detract. So again, they're not just not saying something, they're actually saying something probably negative. And you can see there how the different dioceses as well shook out there. Preaching and homilies. Okay. St. John and Paul again. But again, you're about 36% overall. So we're about that a third almost. Forming me as a disciple, even less. And here we have a newcomer to the top spot, a small parish actually down in Houston, that really talks about discipleship a lot, uses the language of discipleship, orients people in every moment of parish life to how it connects to discipleship. But 24% overall. And slightly higher on the making me feel welcomed and accepted, almost close to 40%. And here we have a parish from Tulsa, Oklahoma, who has a really robust welcome team that they are very proud of. So, likelihood to recommend the parish. That's one way you could say the parish is vibrant. We would say that's only part of the picture. And so I think what we want to be careful of, again, this is my opinion, is that we don't get into a kind of membership business or entitlement business as a parish, that we certainly provide service, but we don't just provide services to provide services. We do that to bring people closer to the Lord and to help them bring others closer to the Lord. To your bishop's point, we're trying to make friends of Jesus and have people grow in their friendship with Jesus. So we went a step further in our survey, and we asked questions around how they personally would assess their relationship with Jesus Christ, and how would they say that relationship is growing or maybe not growing in their relationship. Okay. Somebody said to me when we were going over this data, they said, when we look at all these numbers, it's just a lot of facts and figures. And I said, well, actually, it's the aggregated voices of people. This is people taking about 10 or 15 minutes to respond to a survey. So it is numbers, but it is numbers of people's voices. So we always just need to remember that when we look at data. But let's look at what they said relative to that. We asked the question, which of the following best describes where you are on your Catholic journey? And we gave people 4 choices. I consider myself Catholic, though faith is not a significant part of my life. I practice my Catholic faith, but do not know Jesus personally like a friend. I have personally encountered Jesus Christ and am growing as a disciple. And my relationship with Jesus Christ is the most important relationship in my life. So people had those 4 options to select. When we look at how it broke down, 4% again of our respondents said, I consider myself Catholic, though faith is not a significant part of my life. And we bless them quite honestly for taking the time, because it's valuable information for us as we seek to minister. 27% said, I practice my Catholic faith, but do not know Jesus personally like a friend. I'm coming, but possibly I don't know why. 38% said, I have personally encountered Jesus Christ and am growing as a disciple. And 31%, my relationship with Jesus Christ is the most important relationship in my life. So people all along that spectrum. Okay? going to let this one sink in for a lot going on this graph, but it's an interesting one. We were able to layer over in our analysis those different categories that I just mentioned with another question that we asked, which asked them to describe the pace at which they felt like they were growing. The options being, I'm in a period of rapid spiritual growth, I'm growing at a steady pace, growing, would like to grow more, that's that blue bar, content staying where I am, stalled in spiritual growth, or in a period of spiritual decline. So you can see kind of how those trends broke down with the people who said, I'm Catholic, but faith is not an important part of my life. I'm practicing Catholic, but I don't know Jesus personally as a friend. I'm growing as a disciple, and Jesus is the most important relationship in my life. I take great comfort and encouragement from this slide. And I'll tell you why. One, you see those blue bars, right? A lot of people saying, I'd like to grow more. That was the choice that they selected. However, I think if you look at the folks who also said, I'm stalled in my spiritual growth. So they had a choice. They could have said, I'm content where I am. I'm not practicing and I'm content where I am. But they chose stalled. They chose something that indicates, again, in my opinion, I'm not where I want to be. Okay? As well as those who said, I'm in a period of spiritual decline. Something's not right at this point in my life. So great opportunity for us who seek to serve, that there's people out there who are hungry. The trick is finding how we can best minister to them. It's really hard to prove causality with any time you do a survey, and even with the most rigorous of analyses, but one of the things we noticed, if we looked at the jumps, okay, in activities and beliefs between these different categories of folks, people who indicated I consider myself Catholic but don't practice, and practicing Catholics, in this first part, in that green part, those first two categories, if you will, in this case we saw the biggest differentiation between what they believed. So we asked about core beliefs in the church. I don't have time to go through all of those, but we asked about their belief in the true presence. We asked in the relationship that the church has in their relationship with God. We asked about Jesus being, Scripture being Jesus' word coming to us. The two biggest things we saw that differentiated people who consider themselves Catholic but didn't practice and practice their faith, even if they don't know Jesus personally as a friend, was their belief in the Eucharist as the true presence. Okay? So as you're thinking about what you might do in your parish or what you currently do in your parish, how often are we helping people to understand the mystery of the Eucharist? Could be something that you take away from today. The other one was the people who said that they were a practicing Catholic fundamentally had a better appreciation or a stronger appreciation for the role of the church in their relationship and in their life. Okay? When you look at the next biggest jump was actually between those who say they're practicing but don't know Jesus and those who are growing as a disciple and Jesus is the most important relationship. Here we see a difference in the frequency of activities that they're participating in. Devotions, confession, and Eucharistic adoration, Bible study in small groups, as well as individual prayer. Okay? So it seemed, what was interesting to us was what came out relative to what differentiated folks was a participation in whatever you want to call it, one-to-God activities, one-to-one activities, or one-to-small group activities. There wasn't a lot of large-scale kind of lectures or things like that. Those might be happening, but they didn't differentiate the groups at all. So again, I don't know what that means, and I can't prove to you that this is the cause or the effect, but I thought it was interesting information to share with you from what we're seeing and trying to dig into further. We asked a question if they felt like their parish helped them develop a personal prayer life that connects me with God. So if one of our calls is to talk to our friends, we need to be talking to the Lord. There were 22%, this is actually Pittsburgh-specific numbers, 22% who strongly agreed, 33% disagree or are neutral. So again, when you think about your parish's activities, think about what we're doing, not to pray with people, but to actually help teach people learn how to pray. Learn how to pray. And if there wasn't just the salvific mission of God that we are obviously called to, there's other benefits to people growing in their relationship to the Lord. We're able to do more ministry. We asked about attitudes toward giving. One other thing that was differentiated people was that when people said that they were growing as a disciple or that Jesus is the most important relationship in their life, they tend to give a percentage of their income to their parish. So they're making that conscious stewardship decision to tithe in some regard to their parish. Okay? So again, you can see a huge difference relative to where they feel like they are and what they're choosing to invest in relative to the ministries of the parish. So we talked about their relationship, their personal relationship to the Lord. Okay? The other question is, are they coming and then going? Helene kind of made that distinction between come and see and go and make. Okay? And so our questions to them did they feel equipped, and were they going out to make disciples? We asked this question: my parish equips me to have conversations about my faith with family and friends by teaching me how to share the story of Jesus, the gospel message. 15% strongly agree, 39% disagree or are neutral. So people don't know how to have that conversation. And this was across the board, but these numbers are specific to Pittsburgh, but they're average basically close to the rest of the sample size. Next question, kind of close to home. My parish equips me to have conversations about my faith with family and friends by teaching me how to share my personal witness story. Even less. 55% disagree or are neutral. So again, people feeling like they might want to have the conversation, but don't know how to have the conversation. Okay? And so again, an opportunity when you think about your parish's activities, what types of either one-on-one or small group type of preparation for having people tell their story of faith. The other thing that was interesting about this is for the people who said Jesus was the most important relationship in their life and who said that they were growing rapidly, they were on this kind of spiritual growth, they were also the most frequently telling their story of faith. So they were telling their own story, and I might argue, as somebody who's been trying to do that more, it actually helps you in your relationship with Jesus. Not only helps somebody else who might be in the pews hearing your story to connect there, but it's actually helping you kind of appreciate and grow in that relationship with Jesus. What we need: a church able to make sense of the night contained in the flight of so many of our brothers and sisters from Jerusalem. A church which realizes that the reasons why people leave also contain reasons why they can eventually return. And so what I didn't mention to you was in my story about Annie and my wife, the number of people, priests and otherwise, who were in our lives at that time, reminding us where God was. I went to confession not too long after this period, and I said, God, I said to the pastor, I said, I don't really remember praying that much other than that moment. And he said, but Dan, so many people were praying for you. And it was true. And yet people are experiencing those moments of life all the time. And the church is there, or the church can be there. The church can be there in very profound ways and help people come back and come to know Jesus. So for the real instructions on how to make disciples, the best book on leadership is Basic Instructions Before Leaving Earth, otherwise known as the Bible. And so what we are recommending and working on developing curriculum and training and tools around is actually helping the folks who are intentional disciples become disciple makers. And we don't think it's a one-size-fits-all, and we don't think we're a silver bullet, but what we think is if people can start telling their own story of faith, break the silence, as Sherry Waddell said, Just talk about what God's doing for you. That's all. In a way that allows people to access that, to encounter that. But if we can give people, really equip them with skills to go out and tell their story of faith, to tell the story of Jesus, to welcome people, we think that that's the leverage point. We have a lot of work to do. We have a lifetime, all of us, of work and ministry to do, but we think we need to start there. Focus our intention on the people who might be sitting next to you, across from you, in church every weekend, and are coming and are wanting a reason to connect more deeply. Those are the people we're suggesting you start with. Because once we have more disciple makers, we can go back and invite more to come and see. Invite our brothers and sisters who have left for some reason to know that there's a place for them in our church. There's always been a place for them in our church. And then to bring them along in their discipleship journey. Now, that sounds really easy. I just made it sound really easy, right? And you all have it figured out. You're walking out of here completely satisfied with my tools and tricks for disciple making. I have one other story for you, though, and then I want to have some questions and answers. About a year ago, I had a moment in my family. And I'm from a Catholic family. I went to Catholic school, but I'm the Catholic one in the family. You guys know how that works? Italian Catholic family. I'm the Catholic one in the family. So anytime, growing up, we didn't really say prayers before meals every night, only when it was a fancy dinner. Fancy dinner equaled shrimp cocktail. If there was shrimp cocktail, it was this logic. If there was shrimp cocktail, then we had grace before meals. And because I work for the church, I'm the only one who's allowed to pray out loud. So it would go something like this. Shrimp would be on the table. Mom would say, Danny, why don't you lead us in grace? And then it would be the bless us, O Lord kind of roll, and then we go from there. So about a year ago, my father was diagnosed with cancer. And I get this call from my mom, and she's terrified, obviously, and he had just retired. And so it was this tremendously stressful, and so many people, I'm sure, here have gone through that with loved ones or themselves, but this incredibly stressful period of time of waiting for test results and figuring out how bad it was and what course of treatments and whatnot. So come to find several weeks and months later that it's actually kind of best case scenario, very treatable. Dad's going to be okay. At the same time, I'm hearing and involved with work a lot more about the new evangelization. And there was something written by Cardinal Dolan around this article I think he called kind of What's at Stake? And reminding people that there's something at stake here. This is not just about filling pews. We're talking about salvation. So we want to help Jesus save souls. We want people to be saved. And that's, at the end of the day, what we're doing here. So if you think I'm making this sound easy, I know it's not. And I wouldn't consider myself in that disciple maker pool. I'm a disciple and I'm growing more, and I'd like to be able to be equipped to do that, but I need help. And there's lots of people who want to do it who need help. And so ours as a church is to figure out the best way we can equip people to go out and tell them the great things that the Lord is doing in their life.
Can you describe the training that you're going to conduct in 2 hours that's going to make us disciple makers?
Wait, am I giving a training in 2 hours? No, I think that's a different training, right? Or is that me? Oh, that's this. I think that's. Yes. Oh, that. Helene's going to tell you about that. That's a good segue to Helene.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dan. It's always a joy to have you among us in Pittsburgh. A couple things, closing remarks. Reasons for hope. Our reasons for hope. Always be ready to give your reason for hope is what we heard from St. Peter. A reason for hope is that this diocese is concluding a historic campaign, our campaign for the Church Alive. And we have developed capacities to ask and invite people to share a dream. There are thousands of our sisters and brothers throughout our 199 parishes who have stepped out and begun to ask and to perhaps be able to articulate what it is they believe in and why they want to invite others to believe in their parish, in this diocese, and most importantly, in Jesus Christ. And so the training and the experiences that we've had in our campaign are a great reason for hope. I think our presbyterate, our priests, are a great reason for hope. I know Victoria made us mindful of the caution about the cult of personality, but truly presiding, preaching, effective liturgy, those factors that people are referring folks to their parish around are very much focused on our priests, but our priests who are leaders are those who engage the talents of the faithful, who support the laity in their appropriate role. And so we know that many of our priests, complemented by our deacons and lay ecclesial ministers and all of you, really are ripe for this moment. I have great reason for hope because of our presbyterate, because so many are engaged in forming and engaging us as formators and as disciple makers. The other reason for hope, I would say, is, in fact, Bishop's pastoral letter. And the pastoral letter is really the work of many months of prayer and discernment by the bishop and consulting people. We both were in Washington when he was drafting it and had the expertise of Dr. Michael Terrian, who is another reason for hope. Dr. Michael Terrian, Bishop appointed as the new Secretary for Evangelization and Catholic Education. He comes to us from the Augustine Institute in Denver, where he's been a leader in delivering online graduate level programs to pastoral leaders in the new evangelization. So Dr. Terrian is another reason for hope. But my greatest reason for hope is for all of you. The answer to how do you make a disciple into a disciple maker, one of the answers Dan shared with us is to be able to share our story, to be able to say how Jesus has been such a dear and sweet friend to us. And I think seeing all of you here and knowing your desire to grow in the capacity to share your story, to not only be a friend of Jesus, but to introduce him to others, is another great reason for hope. We have over 200 people signed up for this workshop in a very short amount of time. And so you will be joined this evening by other leaders in the diocese who were here, Dan, and also begin to grow in the capacity to share the story of how Jesus is such a dear friend to them and invite others into that intimate relationship with our Lord. So what's next? On July 19th, we will be having a training here to really train trainers to go into the parishes to invite prayer, reflection, study, and discussion on Bishop Zubik's pastoral letter. The pastoral letter has reflection questions that correlate to each chapter. And so on July 19th, there'll be a 2-hour training where you participants will be invited to see some best practices of how and where, and most importantly, why to share this pastoral letter. It is available also in an online platform, and so our sharing could be around our kitchen table, our group, our daily mass group. It could be moms and dads who are waiting to pick up kids after CCD or at soccer practice. We're kind of looking at this as an ad hoc. We're going to read and pray and study this document together, to dialogue about it with friends. So that's the training on July 19th. It's really to equip us to be able to share the story of how to be a friend of Jesus, so all of us can make friends for Jesus. That is Saturday, July 19th. There are flyers in the vestibule. There also are many more of the beautiful, we call it the Lectio Divina edition of the pastoral letter. The letter was written to be prayed over, to be meditated with, and to be engaged so that your insights, your reflections, your ideas, how the Spirit is touching you to be a friend of Jesus and make friends for Jesus with all of us. We're in a common learning and reading and study period right now around Bishop's pastoral letter. So that training will be on July 19th. There are many pastoral letters available for you to take home with you. We printed over 20,000 Through the generosity of our campaign for the Church Alive, we were able to print 20,000 copies. Shortly, an edition will be available in Spanish. On July 1st, we'll have this first Spanish edition of a pastoral letter for our diocese available. But there are boxes. You're invited to take a box and to begin on your own, just as the early disciples. Go and make disciples. Go with this text, read it, answer the reflection questions chapter by chapter, but on July 19th, we'll have a more systematic way of best practices and how to do that in different forms and in different settings. Secondly, what is next is that we had heard Dan speak about Sherry Waddell and her book, Making Intentional Disciples. Sherry Waddell will be here in the diocese October 24th and 25th for workshops. One is on Friday and the other is on Saturday. It's either or. You don't have to come to both, but those who can come Friday 10 to 3. Those who can come Saturday from 10 to 3. And she will be working with us through her text on forming intentional disciples. That's October 24th and 25th. More information is on our website, the diocesan website, churchevangelizing.com.